My father laughed when I told him I was joining the Valdris City SWAT sniper unit. Said women couldn't handle the pressure of life-or-death shots. 3 years later, when terrorists took 200 hostages at the Meridian Tower and demanded I make an impossible 1,200-yard shot through a window no bigger than a dinner plate to save them all, he wasn't laughing anymore. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Lieutenant Kendra Voss, and for 28 years, I'd been trying to prove to my father that precision shooting wasn't just a man's game. Growing up in the mountain town of Pine Ridge, Montana, I was the daughter of Captain Rex Voss, a decorated military sniper who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan and came home with more confirmed kills than anyone in his unit. To him, I was just the girl who couldn't even hit a deer at 50 yards. "Shootin's about ice water in your veins, Kenny," he'd say, using that condescending nickname that made my teeth clench. "Women get emotional. Emotional shooters miss. And when you miss in the real world, people die." He never let me forget the hunting trip when I was 16. We'd been tracking a 10-point buck for hours through the Blackstone Mountains. When we finally had our shot, I'd lined up my scope, controlled my breathing just like he taught me, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet sailed 2 inches high and to the left. The buck bolted. Dad shook his head and muttered something about wasted ammunition and women who thought they could play soldier. That miss haunted me through 4 years at the Colorado State Police Academy, where I graduated top of my marksmanship class. It followed me through my early years as a patrol officer in Valdris City, where I volunteered for every firearms training course available. Even when I scored perfect marks at the range, hitting targets at distances that made seasoned officers whistle in appreciation, I could still hear Dad's voice in my head. "Range shooting's different than real shooting, Kenny. Real shooting's when your hands shake and your heart pounds and someone's life depends on you not choking." My younger brother, Tyler, had followed Dad into the Marines and earned his own sniper badge in Iraq. Every family dinner became a competition between their war stories while I sat there in my patrol uniform, listening to them talk about real combat, like I was some kind of tourist. Mom would try to change the subject, but Dad always steered it back to the fundamental differences between men and women under pressure. The irony was that I'd already proven myself under pressure dozens of times as a patrol officer. I'd talked down suicidal jumpers from the Riverside Bridge. I'd pursued armed suspects through the warehouse district without backup. I'd performed CPR on a child who'd nearly drowned while other officers stood frozen. But none of that mattered to Dad because it didn't involve a rifle scope and a target at long distance. When the Valdris City SWAT team announced they were looking for a new sniper to replace Detective Morrison, who was retiring, I knew it was my chance. The qualification course was brutal. Precision shots at distances up to 800 yards in various weather conditions with moving targets under time pressure. Out of 37 applicants, I was the only woman. Out of 37 applicants, I scored highest in every category. The day I got the call from Command Walsh telling me I'd made the team, I drove straight to Dad's house in Pine Ridge. He was in his garage cleaning his old military rifle, the same Barrett .50 caliber he used overseas. I told him about my selection with barely contained pride. He didn't even look up from his cleaning rod. "SWAT sniper, huh? You know, they probably just needed to fill a quota." "I had the highest scores, Dad." "Scores don't mean anything when the bullets start flying for real." He finally glanced at me, his expression somewhere between pity and amusement. "You remember that buck you missed? That was just a deer, Kenny. What happens when it's a human being holding a gun to someone's head? What happens when there's no second chance?" I wanted to argue, to tell him about all the training scenarios I'd aced, about the stress fire courses where I'd outshot veterans with decades of experience. Instead, I just stood there watching him reassemble his rifle with the casual expertise of someone who'd never doubted his own abilities. "You'll see," he said, sliding the bolt home with a metallic click. "Real shooting separates the professionals from the pretenders, and pretenders get people killed." That conversation happened on a Tuesday in September. By Friday of the same week, I was suited up in full tactical gear, lying on the roof of the Valdris Municipal Building, with my eye pressed against the scope of my custom Remington 700, staring across 12 city blocks at the Meridian Tower, where armed terrorists had taken every person in the building hostage. The impossible shot that would define my career and finally silence my father's doubts was 3 hours away, But first, I had to survive the longest standoff in Valdris City history. I had to prove that when the pressure was real, when lives hung on the balance, when there truly was no second chance, Lieutenant Kendra Voss didn't miss. The radio crackled in my earpiece. "Voss, this is command. We're going to need you to do something that's never been attempted before. Are you ready?" I adjusted my scope and felt that familiar calm settle over me. The same calm I'd felt on every range, in every training scenario, during every moment when everyone else expected me to fail. "Ready, Command. What's the target?"
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It started as a routine Tuesday morning in downtown Valdris City. The Meridian Tower, a gleaming 30-story corporate complex, was hosting the annual Western States Business Summit. 200 of the region's most influential executives, politicians, and industry leaders had gathered in the building's conference center for what was supposed to be 3 days of networking and strategic planning. At 9:47 a.m., everything changed. I was in the SWAT ready room, cleaning my rifle after morning training exercises, when the first emergency call crackled through our radios. "All units, we have reports of gunfire at the Meridian Tower, 1200 Corporate Plaza. Multiple casualties reported. SWAT Team Alpha, respond immediately." Commander Walsh burst through their ready room door, his face grim. "Voss, gear up. We've got a situation." The ride to the scene took 8 minutes through morning traffic, sirens wailing as our tactical vehicle weaved between cars. Through the radio chatter, the picture became clearer and more terrifying by the minute. A coordinated team of armed terrorists had stormed the Meridian Tower during the opening ceremony of the business summit. They'd sealed all exits, disabled elevators, and cut communications. Early reports suggested they had automatic weapons, explosives, and a very specific agenda. When we arrived at the perimeter, chaos reigned. Police cars formed a 3-block barrier around the building, while paramedics treated wounded security guards who'd managed to escape during the initial assault. Television news vans were already setting up, their satellite dishes pointing skyward like metal flowers seeking the sun. Commander Walsh grabbed me by the shoulder as I shouldered my rifle case. "Voss, I need you on overwatch. Get to the municipal building roof. You'll have the best sight lines to the tower from there." "What's the situation inside?" I asked, checking my equipment one final time. "Unknown number of hostiles, but at least 6. They've taken everyone on floors 15 through 20 hostage. That's where the summit was being held. We're talking about senators, CEOs, federal judges, the kind of people whose deaths would make international headlines." My stomach clenched. This wasn't a bank robbery or a domestic dispute gone wrong. This was terrorism on a scale that Valdris City have never seen. "Any demands yet?" Walsh shook his head. "Radio silence. They're not answering phones, not responding to our bullhorn attempts. Whatever they want, they're playing it close to the vest." I made my way to the municipal building, a 12-story structure that offered a direct line of sight to the Meridian Tower. The roof access was controlled by building security, but my SWAT credentials got me through without questions. As I climbed the final flight of stairs, my radio buzzed with updates from the Tactical Command Center. "Overwatch, this is Command. Be advised, we have confirmation of explosive devices visible through the windows on floor 17. Bomb Squad is analyzing through binoculars, but initial assessment suggests significant destructive capability." I pushed through the roof access door and was hit by the full scope of the situation. The Meridian Tower stood like a glass and steel monolith 12 blocks away, its windows reflecting the morning sun. From my position, I could see figures moving behind those windows, some in dark tactical gear, others who appeared to be hostages. Setting up my shooting position took 3 minutes. I extended my rifle's bipod legs, checked my scope adjustments for the distance and wind conditions, and established communication with the Tactical Command Center. Through my scope, the tower's windows leapt into sharp focus, revealing details that made my blood run cold. On floor 17, I could see at least 20 hostages sitting on the floor, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Among them, I recognized several faces from the local news. Mayor Patricia Hendricks, tech billionaire Jonathan Reed, federal prosecutor Amanda Cross. These weren't random victims. They were carefully selected high-value targets. Moving between the hostages were figures in black tactical gear, faces covered by balaclavas, carrying what appeared to be AK-47 assault rifles. Professional movements, coordinated positioning, military-style discipline. These weren't desperate amateurs. They were trained operatives. Command, this is Overwatch. I have visual on multiple hostiles floor 17. Count at least 4 armed suspects, possibly more out of sight. Hostages appear unharmed but restrained. I can see what look like explosive devices mounted on the windows. Copy that, Overwatch. Maintain position and report any changes. For the next hour, I watched through my scope as the situation developed. The terrorists moved with purpose, rotating positions, checking their equipment, clearly waiting for something. At 11:15 a.m., they finally made contact. A single phone call to the mayor's office routed through to our command center. The voice was electronically distorted, but the message was crystal clear. They wanted the release of 12 specific prisoners from federal facilities across the country, $50 million in cryptocurrency, and guaranteed safe passage out of the country. They had explosives sufficient to bring down the entire building. Any attempt at rescue would result in the immediate execution of all hostages. And to prove we're serious, the electronically distorted voice continued, look at floor 19. Through my scope, I watched in horror as 2 terrorists dragged a man in a business suit to a window on the 19th floor. Senator Richard Hawthorne, whose campaign ads I'd seen on television for months. They held him against the glass for 10 seconds, long enough for every sniper and observer to see his face, then pulled him back inside. The message was unmistakable. We're not bluffing. Commander Walsh's voice came through my earpiece, tight with tension. Overwatch, we need you to maintain visual on all possible entry points. FBI's en route, but they won't be here for another 2 hours. Until then, you're our eyes and ears.
As I settled in for what I knew would be a long standoff, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly the kind of situation my father had warned me about. The kind where there were no practice rounds, no second chances, no room for the kind of mistake that had cost me a dear 12 years ago. The only difference was, this time, missing wouldn't just disappoint my father. This time, missing would cost 200 innocent lives. Copy that, Command, I replied, adjusting my scope for the long watch ahead. Overwatch is in position and ready. But even as I said it, I had no idea that within the next few hours, I'd be asked to take a shot that would be considered impossible by every sniper manual ever written. The shot that would either save every hostage in that building or haunt me for the rest of my life. 2 hours into the standoff, when the FBI finally arrived, I learned the truth about what we were really facing. Special Agent Victoria Sterling climbed onto the roof where I had been maintaining my watch, her expression grim as winter in Montana. She carried a tactical tablet loaded with intelligence that made my blood freeze. "Lieutenant Voss, I need to brief you on what we're dealing with," she said, crouching beside my shooting position. "This isn't just terrorism. This is personal warfare." She activated the tablet, showing me photographs and dossiers that revealed the nightmare we'd walked into. The terrorist leader was Dmitry Kozlov, a former Russian Spetsnaz operative who'd gone rogue after a NATO operation in Syria had killed his wife and daughter. The other 5 terrorists were all former military: 2 ex-Navy SEALs discharged for misconduct, a former SAS operative, a disgraced Israeli Defense Force sniper, and a German GSG-9 counterterrorism specialist turned mercenary. These aren't fanatics with a cause. They're professional killers with nothing left to lose. Kozlov has been planning this for 3 years, studying our response protocols, identifying our weaknesses. The intelligence got worse. Through intercepted communications, the FBI had learned that the explosive devices weren't just threats, they were dead man switches connected to Kozlov's biometric readings. If his heart stopped, if his stress levels spiked beyond certain parameters, or if he was knocked unconscious, the entire building would detonate. They'd turned the Meridian Tower into a 200-person grave with a living trigger. The ransom demands are a smokescreen. Kozlov doesn't want money or prisoner releases. He wants to kill as many high-profile Americans as possible in the most spectacular way imaginable. The longer we delay, the more time he has to execute his real plan. Through my scope, I watched the terrorists moving with calculated precision through the 17th floor. They'd positioned hostages in specific locations, always near windows, always visible to our surveillance, always in positions that would maximize casualties if the building collapsed. Every 15 minutes, they forced a different hostage to stand at the window, a psychological tactic designed to keep us from attempting any aggressive action. "What's the real timeline?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Sterling checked her watch. "Our cyber division broke into his communications 20 minutes ago. At sunset, approximately 6:30 p.m., he's planning to detonate regardless of whether his demands are met. He's using the negotiations to buy time while his team plants additional explosives throughout the building's support structure." That gave us 4 hours. 4 hours to save 200 innocent people from a man who'd turned mass murder into a precision operation. The revelation that crushed me came next. Sterling pulled up building schematics on her tablet, showing me the architectural nightmare we faced. The Meridian Tower had been designed with post-9/11 security in mind. Blast-resistant windows, reinforced stairwells, and a central core that could withstand significant structural damage. Those same features that were meant to protect occupants now made rescue impossible. Every entry point is covered by explosives. The elevator shafts, the stairwells, even the emergency fire escapes. They've essentially turned the building into a fortress. Any attempt at forced entry triggers immediate detonation. What about the roof? Helicopter approach is impossible. They've got shoulder-fired missiles, we confirmed visually an hour ago. Plus, the roof access is rigged with enough C4 to turn any aircraft into debris. I felt the weight of impossibility settling on my shoulders. So we're looking at a siege situation with no possible resolution. Not exactly. Sterling's expression grew even more serious. There's one possibility, but it's never been attempted under these conditions. She showed me thermal imaging of the building, pointing to a specific location on the 17th floor. Kozlov is wearing the dead man switch device on his chest. It's connected to his heart rate and brain activity through sensors placed here, here, and here. She indicated points on his skull and wrist. If we could disable the device without triggering the biometric alarms... "You're talking about surgical precision shooting," I said, understanding immediately. "Taking out the device without killing him or triggering the sensors." The device is approximately 6 inches by 4 inches, positioned over his heart. The kill switch is a component roughly the size of a quarter, located in the upper right corner. Our tech analysis suggests that destroying that specific component would disable the entire system without triggering the dead man protocol. I did the math in my head. Through my scope, I could see Kozlov moving around the 17th floor, but the shot Sterling was describing would require hitting a target the size of a quarter at a distance of 12 city blocks through reinforced blasts while the target was in motion without hitting any of the surrounding components that would trigger the explosions.
"Agent Sterling," I said quietly, "what you're describing is impossible. The margin of error is microscopic. Even under perfect conditions, on a static range, with unlimited time to line up the shot, the probability of success would be less than 5%. "I know," she replied. "That's why we've contacted every military sniper within 500 miles. None of them think it can be done." "Then why are you telling me about it?" Sterling studied me for a long moment. "Because you're the only sniper in position. And because sometimes impossible is the only option we have left." She handed me a specialized scope attachment that would magnify my view even further. "This will give you the precision you need to see the target clearly, but the rest is up to you. The shot window will come when he moves to the north-facing window. That's the only angle that gives you a clear line of sight to the device." As if summoned by our conversation, my radio crackled with an update from the command center. "Overwatch, be advised. We're getting reports of additional explosive devices being installed on lower floors. The subjects are accelerating their timeline." Through my scope, I could see increased activity on the 17th floor. The terrorists were moving with more urgency now, checking equipment, positioning charges, preparing for their endgame. Among the hostages, I recognized faces I'd seen on television, in newspapers, people whose deaths would send shockwaves through the entire country. Mayor Hendricks sat with her hands zip-tied, her face pale but determined. Beside her, tech billionaire Jonathan Reed was trying to keep the other hostages calm, speaking quietly to an elderly woman who appeared to be having a panic attack. These weren't statistics or strategic assets. They were human beings with families, children, futures that hung in the balance.
There's something else, Sterling added, her voice barely above a whisper. Kozlov knows about you. What do you mean? He's been monitoring our communications. 20 minutes ago, he specifically requested to speak with the female sniper on the municipal building. He knows you're here, he knows your position, and he knows you're the only one who might have a chance at this shot. The psychological warfare was masterful. Kozlov had turned me from hunter into prey, making me a specific part of his plan. Every minute I spent in position, every adjustment I made to my rifle, every breath I took was being observed and analyzed by a man who'd spent years studying how to break American resolve. He wants to watch you fail, she concluded. He wants the last thing those hostages see is their one hope taking a shot and missing. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the city, I realized that in 4 hours, everything would be over. Either 200 innocent people would walk out of that building alive, or Valdris City would witness the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. And the difference between those outcomes rested entirely on my ability to make a shot that every expert had declared impossible. The same hands that had missed a deer at 50 yards would now have to hit a quarter-sized target at 1,200 yards through glass on a moving subject while the lives of 200 people hung in the balance. My father's voice echoed in my memory. Real shooting separates the professionals from the pretenders. In 4 hours, I'd find out which one I really was. After Special Agent Sterling left me alone on that rooftop, with the weight of 200 lives pressing down on my shoulders, something inside me began to crack. Not my resolve, that remained solid as the concrete beneath my rifle's bipod, but the careful walls I'd built around my deepest fears, the ones that had protected me through years of my father's dismissal and doubt, those walls started crumbling. I pressed my eye to the scope and watched Dmitry Kozlov move through the 17th floor like a predator surveying his territory. Through the enhanced magnification, I could see the dead man's switch device clearly now, a rectangular black box strapped to his chest with the quarter-size kill component Sterling had described. It might as well have been on the moon. The mathematical reality of what I was being asked to do hit me with brutal clarity. At 1,200 yards, even a microscopic tremor in my hands would translate to inches of deviation at the target. Wind gusts, changes in air pressure, the natural movement of my heartbeat, the slight vibration from traffic 12 stories below, any of these factors could turn a perfect shot into catastrophic failure. I'd trained for precision shooting my entire career, but this was beyond precision. This was surgery performed with a rifle from over half a mile away. My radio crackled with updates from the Tactical Command Center. Overwatch, be advised, we're getting reports of additional explosive devices being installed on lower floors. The subjects are accelerating their timeline. 247, not 200. The number kept growing, and with it, the weight of potential failure. Each face I could see through my scope had a family, a story, a future that depended on my ability to do something no sniper in history had accomplished under these conditions. I thought about the deer, that damned 10-point buck that had haunted me for 12 years. The memory played in my mind like a broken film reel. The careful stalk through the Blackstone Mountains, the perfect setup, my father's whispered encouragement, the crosshairs lined up exactly where they should be, the gentle squeeze of the trigger, and then the sickening realization that I'd missed. 2 inches high and to the left. Such a small margin of error, but enough to send a 180-pound buck bounding into the forest while my father shook his head in disappointment.
Emotional shooters miss, his voice echoed in my memory, and when you miss in the real world, people die. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, facing the most emotionally charged shooting scenario imaginable, being asked to make a shot that would challenge even a machine's capabilities, while my father's words about emotional stability echoed in my head like a curse. I called Tyler, my brother, on my personal cell phone. He answered on the second ring, his voice bright with the casual confidence of someone whose shooting abilities had never been questioned. "Kenny? What's up? I saw something on the news about a situation in Valdris City." I'm in the middle of it, Ty. I'm the primary sniper. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. When Tyler spoke again, his voice had shifted to that careful tone he used when he was trying not to say something that might hurt my feelings. Jesus, Kenny. How are you handling it? They need me to take a shot that's basically impossible. Everyone says it can't be done. What kind of shot? I explained the technical requirements, the distance, the target size, the consequences of missing. With each detail, the silence on Tyler's end grew longer. Kenny, he said finally, maybe you should request backup. Maybe there's someone else who could... There is no one else, Tyler. I'm the only sniper in position, and we're running out of time. But if it's really impossible... If even the FBI experts say it can't be done, I heard what he wasn't saying. The same doubt that had followed me my entire life, the same assumption that when the stakes were highest, when the pressure was real, I wouldn't be able to deliver. Even my own brother, who'd seen me outshoot him at family gatherings, who'd watched me graduate top of my academy class, still carried that fundamental uncertainty about my abilities under pressure. I have to go, Tyler. Kenny, wait. Maybe you should call Dad. Maybe he could... I hung up before he could finish the sentence. Call Dad. Ask for his advice on how to make the shot of my lifetime while 247 innocent people waited to die. The same man who'd told me I didn't have ice water in my veins, who'd insisted that women couldn't handle the pressure of life or death situations, my hands began to shake. Not from fear of the shot itself, but from the weight of a lifetime of doubt finally catching up to me. Every missed target at the academy that had made instructors exchange glances. Every time a male colleague had been chosen for a high-stakes assignment while I got routine patrol duty. Every family dinner where Dad and Tyler shared war stories while I sat silent, knowing that my accomplishments would never measure up to their standards of what constituted real shooting. Through my scope, I watched one of the terrorists drag Mayor Hendricks to the window again. This time, they held her there for a full minute, forcing her to stare directly at the municipal building where they knew I was positioned. The message was clear. We know you're watching, we know you're afraid, and we know you're going to fail. Mayor Hendricks was 53 years old, a mother of 2 teenage daughters. I'd voted for her in the last election because of her stance on supporting women in law enforcement. Now she was being used as a psychological weapon against me, her life hanging in the balance while I battled demons that had nothing to do with wind speed or bullet drop calculations. I tried to control my breathing, to find the calm center that had carried me through countless training scenarios. But this wasn't training. This was the real world that my father had always said would expose my weaknesses, the moment when emotional stability would determine whether I was a professional or a pretender. The scope's crosshairs danced slightly as tremors ran through my arms, microscopic movements that would translate to massive misses at 1,200 yards. I closed my eyes and tried to find the zone I'd accessed during my best shooting performances. But all I could hear was my father's voice listing all the reasons why women couldn't handle the pressure. Overwatch, this is command, came the voice through my earpiece. We're showing some movement on the 19th floor. Kozlov's team is expanding their perimeter. How's your visual on the primary target? I opened my eyes and refocused on the 17th floor. Kozlov was there, moving with the casual confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. The dead man's switch device was clearly visible on his chest, the quarter-size kill component exactly where Sterling had described it. Visual confirmed, I responded, hoping my voice didn't betray the chaos in my mind. Copy that. Time check, 3 hours, 15 minutes until projected detonation. 3 hours and 15 minutes to overcome a lifetime of doubt, to prove that when the moment mattered most, when 247 innocent lives depended on precision beyond anything attempted in sniper history, Lieutenant Kendra Voss wouldn't choke. I settled back into my shooting position, forcing my breathing into the steady rhythm I'd practiced 10,000 times. But as I pressed my eye to the scope again, I couldn't escape the terrible knowledge that every expert who'd examined this situation had reached the same conclusion. The shot couldn't be made. Not under these conditions, not with these stakes, not by anyone. And certainly not by the woman who'd missed a deer at 50 yards and spent 12 years trying to prove she belonged in a world that had never really believed in her.
In 3 hours, I'd either vindicate every person who'd ever believed in my abilities, or I'd prove my father right in the most catastrophic way imaginable. As I struggled with my shaking hands and the weight of impending failure, something unexpected happened. A maintenance worker appeared at the roof access door behind me, carrying what looked like a standard toolbox and wearing a faded blue jumpsuit with Meridian properties embroidered on the chest. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am," he said in a gravelly voice weathered by decades of cigarettes. "I'm Eddie Torino, building supervisor for the municipal complex. Got a work order to check the radio antenna array up here." I barely glanced back at him, keeping my focus on the scope. "This is a restricted area. You need to leave immediately." "I understand, but this antenna feeds the emergency communication system for the whole district. If it goes down during your operation..." He left the sentence hanging, but the implication was clear. Eddie moved past me toward a cluster of communication equipment near the roof's edge, staying well clear of my shooting lane. As he worked, he spoke quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough for me to hear. 37 years I've been maintaining buildings in this city. Seen a lot of things from up high that people down below miss." He unscrewed a panel on one of the antenna housings. "That Meridian Tower, for instance. Beautiful building, but they cut corners during construction back in '89. Despite my focus on the hostage situation, something in his tone made me listen more carefully. "Wind patterns around that building are tricky," Eddie continued, adjusting some internal wiring. "All those glass surfaces create weird air currents. Most people don't notice, but when you're working with precision equipment," he glanced meaningfully at my rifle, "well, wind matters." I kept my eye pressed to the scope, but I was listening now. "What do you mean?" Eddie pulled out a small device that looked like a digital anemometer. "See, the city planners never accounted for the thermal updrafts from the Meridian's south-facing solar collection system. Creates a consistent wind shear pattern that runs counter to the prevailing westerly flow." He showed me the device's display. "Right now, you've probably calculated for a 12 mph crosswind from the west based on the flags and weather reports. But between these two buildings, there's actually a 6 mph downdraft with a slight northerly component. Been consistent all day. I checked it every hour for the past month while working on the communication relay project." My breath caught. A 6 mph wind differential at 1,200 yards would mean a deviation of nearly 18 inches from my calculated point of impact. I'd been compensating for the wrong wind conditions entirely. "How do you know this?" I asked, finally turning to look at him properly. Eddie's weathered face cracked into a slight smile. "My grandson's in the Army, sniper with the 75th Rangers. He taught me about wind rating when he was home on leave last Christmas. Said understanding microclimates could mean the difference between hitting your target and..." He didn't finish the sentence. I stared at this unassuming maintenance worker who just potentially saved 247 lives with a casual observation about building wind patterns. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been watching the news feeds. I know what kind of shot you're being asked to make. And I know what happens if you miss." Eddie started walking back toward the roof access door, then paused. "There's something else. The Meridian's windows aren't standard glass. They installed a new thermal coating system 3 months ago. I supervised the installation. The coating affects light refraction, but it also changes how projectiles behave on impact." He reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small sample of glass, about the size of a playing card. "This is a leftover piece from the installation. Same exact material as what you'll be shooting through. Thought you might want to see how it handles impact." I took the glass sample, holding it up to examine the coating. It had a slight blue-green tint that wasn't visible from a distance. What does this mean for bullet penetration?
The coating adds about 3% more resistance than standard glass. Most bullets will still punch through clean, but the entry angle gets altered slightly, maybe half a degree. But at your distance, Eddie shrugged, might be worth factoring in. Half a degree at 1,200 yards could mean the difference between hitting the kill switch component and striking Kozlov's heart, triggering the dead man's device. Another crucial variable that no one else had considered. "Eddie," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in hours, "does anyone else know about these factors?" "Doubt it. The wind pattern thing, that's something you only notice if you're up high every day for months. And the glass coating, that was installed by a specialist crew from Germany. Most people don't even know it exists." As Eddie disappeared back down the stairwell, I realized I'd just been handed information that could change everything. Not just technical data, but hope. For the first time since learning about the impossible shot, I had variables that no one else, including Kozlov, had accounted for.
I thought about my own unconventional path to this moment. The missed deer shot that had driven me to perfect my marksmanship. The years of being underestimated that had made me train harder than anyone else. The countless hours on ranges where male instructors had dismissed my potential, forcing me to prove myself again and again until precision became second nature. Maybe my father had been wrong about emotional shooters. Maybe the pressure I felt wasn't a weakness, but a sharpening tool, honing my focus to a level that cold mechanical precision could never achieve. Through my scope, I watched Kozlov check his watch and speak into a radio. 3 hours remaining. But now I had something I hadn't possessed before Eddie's visit. Real hope, based on solid intelligence. I adjusted my scope settings to account for the new wind and refraction data, then settled back into my shooting position. The crosshairs were steadier now, not because my hands had stopped shaking, but because I understood the shot in a way I hadn't before. The quarter-sized kill switch component came into sharp focus through my enhanced optics. With the corrected wind calculations, I could see the exact impact point where my bullet would need to strike. It was still the most challenging shot in sniper history, but it was no longer impossible. Eddie Torino had given me more than just meteorological data and glass specifications. He'd given me the missing pieces of a puzzle that experts had declared unsolvable. Sometimes the difference between success and failure wasn't superior training or better equipment. It was having the right information at the right moment. I keyed my radio. "Command, this is Overwatch. I need to speak with Agent Sterling immediately." "Copy that, Overwatch. Sterling is en route to your position." As I waited for the FBI agent to return to the rooftop, I continued studying the target through my scope, mapping out the precise sequence of movements I'd need to execute when the moment came. The shot was still extraordinary, still beyond anything attempted under combat conditions, but Eddie's intelligence had moved it from the realm of miracles into the territory of extreme skill. For the first time since this nightmare began, I believed I might actually be able to save those 247 people. And for the first time in 12 years, I stopped hearing my father's voice telling me I wasn't good enough. Instead, I heard Eddie's grandson somewhere in Afghanistan learning wind patterns from his grandfather's wisdom. And I realized that expertise and insight could come from the most unexpected sources, including a maintenance worker who understood that sometimes the difference between life and death was knowing which way the wind really blows. Special Agent Sterling returned to the rooftop 15 minutes later, accompanied by a ballistics expert I didn't recognize, and a tactical communications specialist carrying what looked like a small supercomputer. When I shared Eddie's intelligence about the wind patterns and glass coating, Sterling's expression shifted from skeptical to intensely focused. "You're telling me a maintenance worker just solved variables that our best analysts missed?" she asked, studying the glass sample Eddie had left behind. "He's been working these buildings for nearly 40 decades. His grandson is a military sniper. Sometimes local knowledge beats theoretical analysis." The ballistics expert, Dr. Sarah Chen, from the FBI's forensic laboratory, took the glass sample and immediately began examining it with a portable spectrometer. "This coating is definitely affecting light transmission. If it's altering refraction patterns," She paused, running calculations on her tablet. Lieutenant Voss, this could change your impact point by several inches. While Dr. Chen worked on the glass analysis, I focused on verifying Eddie's wind data. Using my own field equipment combined with the communications specialist's weather monitoring gear, we confirmed the maintenance workers' observations. The thermal updrafts from the Meridian Tower's solar collection system were indeed creating a localized downdraft that ran counter to the prevailing winds. He's right, I reported to Sterling. The wind at shooting level is 6 miles per hour from the northeast, not 12 miles per hour from the west like we originally calculated. This changes everything. Sterling coordinated with the Tactical Command Center, requesting updated weather monitoring equipment and additional surveillance on the Meridian Tower's wind patterns. Within 30 minutes, we had 3 more anemometers positioned at various points between the municipal building and the target, creating a real-time wind map of the area. The investigation revealed something even more valuable than corrected environmental data. As I studied the new wind patterns and glass refraction calculations, I noticed something about Kozlov's movement patterns that I'd missed before. Through my scope, I tracked his positions over the course of an hour, mapping his route through the 17th floor. Every 18 minutes, he moved to the north-facing window to check the street below. Every time, he stood in exactly the same position for approximately 45 seconds, speaking into his radio and scanning the police perimeter with binoculars. "Agent Sterling," I said, not taking my eye from the scope, "I've got a pattern. Kozlov has a routine." I shared my observations with the team. The ballistics expert, Dr. Sarah Chen, from the FBI's forensic laboratory, confirmed that the north-facing window position would provide the clearest shot angle, with minimal glass thickness and optimal target presentation. More importantly, during those 45-second windows, Kozlov remained relatively stationary, reducing the challenge of hitting a moving target. "When's his next appearance at that window?" Sterling asked. I checked my timing log. Based on his pattern, 14 minutes. Dr. Chen finished her analysis of the glass sample, her findings confirming Eddie's assessment. The coating adds approximately 3.2% resistance to projectile penetration and alters the entry angle by 0.47 degrees. At your distance, that translates to a horizontal deviation of roughly 8 inches to the left. The communications specialist had been monitoring radio chatter from inside the Meridian Tower, using directional antennas to pick up fragments of the terrorists' communications. "Lieutenant, I'm getting intermittent signals that suggest they're using a tactical frequency around 457.2 megahertz. We can't decode everything, but the timing of their transmissions correlates with your observations about the window checks." This was intelligence gathering at its finest. Each piece of information built upon the others, creating a comprehensive picture of the shot requirements that no one had possessed 3 hours earlier. The wind data from Eddie, the glass analysis from Dr. Chen, the movement pattern observations, and the communication intercepts were combining to transform an impossible shot into a precisely calculated operation. I began working through the complete ballistic solution, incorporating all the new variables. Range, 1,247 yards. Measured by laser rangefinder. Wind, 6 miles per hour downdraft from northeast. Glass refraction, 0.47 degree deflection to the left. Target size, approximately 1 inch by 1 inch. Target movement, minimal during 45-second window every 18 minutes. "The next window is in 7 minutes, I announced. "I need to test my calculations." Sterling coordinated with the command center to set up a practice scenario. Using a drone positioned at exactly the same distance and angle as the Meridian Tower, they attached a target identical in size to the kill switch component. The drone would hover in a stationary position for 45 seconds, simulating Kozlov's window routine. "This is a one-shot test," Sterling warned. "We can't risk Kozlov's team detecting unusual drone activity. You get 1 practice round to verify your calculations." I loaded a single match-grade round into my rifle, the same ammunition I'd use for the actual shot. Through my scope, I could see the drone hovering in position, its target clearly visible against the late afternoon sky. Every variable I'd calculated came into play: wind compensation, glass refraction allowance, range adjustment, and the precise timing of the shot release. The crosshair settled on the target. I controlled my breathing, allowing my heart rate to drop into the optimal zone for precision shooting.
The trigger pull felt smooth and predictable, the rifle's recoil absorbed cleanly by my shooting position. Through my scope, I watched the bullet impact exactly where I'd calculated, dead center on the simulated kill switch component. Target hit, Dr. Chen confirmed through binoculars. Perfect center strike. The practice shot validated everything we'd learned from Eddie's intelligence and our subsequent investigation. More importantly, it proved that the shot could be made under the right conditions. I wasn't attempting the impossible anymore. I was executing a precisely calculated operation based on solid intelligence and verified ballistic data. How long until Kozlov's next window appearance? Sterling asked. I checked my chronometer. 11 minutes. The investigation phase had given us everything we needed: accurate environmental data, target movement patterns, ballistic calculations, and proof that the shot was achievable. But more than technical information, it had restored my confidence in a way that no amount of encouragement could have accomplished. I thought about Eddie Torino, whose casual observation about wind patterns had provided the key to solving an unsolvable problem. I thought about Dr. Chen's precise analysis of the glass coating and the communication specialist's patient monitoring of radio frequencies. None of them were snipers, but each had contributed essential elements to the solution. That's when I realized something fundamental about the moment I was facing. This wasn't just about my shooting ability or my father's doubts about women under pressure. This was about the collective expertise of people who understood that solving complex problems required multiple perspectives and specialized knowledge. The missed deer shot 12 years ago had been about my individual failure to compensate for unknown variables. This shot would succeed because I'd learned to identify and account for every variable that mattered. Agent Sterling, I said, settling back into my final shooting position. I'm ready. Through my scope, I could see Kozlov moving toward the north-facing window, following the pattern we'd observed. In 8 minutes, he would present the target. In 8 minutes, I would either save 247 lives or fail in the most public and catastrophic way imaginable. But for the first time since this crisis began, failure didn't feel inevitable. It felt like one possible outcome among several, and I had done everything in my power to make success the most probable result. The investigation had transformed uncertainty into knowledge, and knowledge into confidence. Now it was time to put that confidence to the ultimate test. With 6 minutes remaining until Kozlov's next window appearance, my radio crackled with an urgent transmission that would change everything I thought I knew about this situation. Overwatch, this is Agent Martinez from Cyber Division. We've just broken the encryption on the terrorist communications, and we need to brief you immediately on what we've discovered. Agent Sterling's expression turned grim as she listened to her earpiece. Patch him through to our tactical frequency, she instructed the communication specialist. Martinez's voice came through clearly now, tight with urgency. Lieutenant Voss, what we're about to tell you changes the entire mission parameters. Kozlov isn't just wearing a dead man's switch. He's wearing a decoy. My finger froze on the trigger guard. What do you mean, decoy? The device on his chest is designed to look like the dead man's switch, but our analysis of their intercepted communications revealed the real trigger mechanism is hidden somewhere else. The actual detonation control is integrated into a backup device worn by one of his lieutenants. Dr. Chen immediately began recalibrating her equipment. Which lieutenant? Where's the real device? That's where it gets complicated, Martinez continued. The real dead man's switch is worn by Elena Vasquez, the former Navy SEAL on the 19th floor. But here's the critical part. Destroying Kozlov's decoy device will trigger an immediate execution protocol. They've programmed the system so that any damage to his chest unit will signal the others to detonate manually. The tactical situation had just become exponentially more complex. I wasn't facing one impossible shot. I was facing a multi-level deception that required surgical precision beyond anything we'd calculated. Agent Martinez, Sterling interjected, what's the real trigger mechanism on Vasquez? It's a wrist-mounted device disguised as a fitness tracker, approximately 2 inches by 1 inch, located on her left wrist. The trigger component is even smaller than what you were targeting on Kozlov, about the size of a dime. Through my scope, I could see movement on the 19th floor. Elena Vasquez came into view, a compact woman with the controlled movements of someone trained in close-quarters combat. On her wrist was indeed what appeared to be a standard fitness tracker, black with a small digital display. The range to the 19th floor is 1,289 yards, I calculated quickly. The angle is more severe, and the glass on that level has a different coating specification. Dr. Chen was already running new ballistic calculations. The 19th floor uses standard glass without the thermal coating. That eliminates the refraction variable, but the increased range and steeper angle introduce new complications. But the revelations weren't finished. Martinez's voice returned with information that sent chills down my spine. Lieutenant, there's something else. Our psychological profile team has been analyzing Kozlov's behavior patterns through the surveillance footage. They believe he knows about your position and has been deliberately exposing himself at the north-facing window to draw your attention to the decoy device. The psychological warfare had been even more sophisticated than we'd realized. Kozlov hadn't just anticipated our sniper response, he'd orchestrated it. Every movement pattern I'd observed, every routine I'd mapped, had been calculated to focus my attention on a target that would trigger disaster if hit. He's been playing us from the beginning, Sterling said grimly. The question is, does he know we've discovered the deception? Through my scope, I watched Kozlov check his watch and move toward the north-facing window right on schedule. But now I understood his confidence differently. He wasn't just protected by an impossible shot. He was protected by misdirection that would turn any attempt to disable his device into a trigger for mass execution. Agent Martinez, I said, beginning new calculations for the Vasquez target. I need updated wind data for the 19th floor elevation. The thermal patterns will be different at that height. Already on it, she replied, coordinating with the weather monitoring team. As I recalibrated my scope for the new target distance and angle, I realized that this revelation represented more than just tactical intelligence. It confirmed something I'd learned throughout my career. The most dangerous enemies weren't necessarily the most skilled, but the most deceptive. Kozlov counted on our conventional response to an unconventional situation. He'd anticipated that we'd focus on the most visible threat without digging deeper into the underlying structure of his operation. His mistake was assuming that investigation would stop once we identified what appeared to be the critical target. Through my scope, I watched Kozlov move through the 19th floor, the real dead man switch clearly visible on his wrist. The device looked innocuous, like thousands of fitness trackers worn by people throughout the city. But I could see the subtle differences now that I knew what to look for. The slightly thicker profile, the additional interface ports, the positioning that kept the trigger component accessible to his thumb. Overwatch, came Martinez's voice again. We're detecting communication spikes between Kozlov and Vasquez. They may be preparing to accelerate the timeline even further. The window for action was closing faster than we'd anticipated. In 90 minutes, or possibly sooner, 247 hostages would die regardless if I took any shot at all. But now I had the real target, the accurate intelligence, and the knowledge that success was still possible. The game-changing discovery had transformed an impossible deception into an achievable mission. Now I just had to execute the most precise shot in sniper history before time ran out completely. With the revelation that Elena Vasquez held the real trigger device, everything had to be recalculated within the next 30 minutes. The tactical team transformed into a precision instrument, each specialist focusing on their critical piece of the new puzzle, while I worked to master a shot that made the original target look simple by comparison. Dr. Chen immediately began analyzing the 19th floor's glass specifications. Standard commercial glass, quarter-inch thickness, no thermal coating. That eliminates the refraction issues, but the steeper angle means bullet deflection will be more pronounced on impact. The communications specialist, whose name I'd learned was Tech Sergeant Rodriguez, was tracking Vasquez's movement patterns with military precision. She's not following a rigid schedule like Kozlov, but there are patterns. Every 12 to 15 minutes, she moves to the northwest corner window to coordinate with someone on the street level, probably their extraction team. I studied Vasquez through my scope.
noting the differences between her behavior and Kozlov's theatrical displays. Where Kozlov moved with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable, Vasquez operated with the efficiency of someone who understood operational security. Her appearances at the window were brief, purposeful, and varied just enough to prevent predictable targeting. The device on her wrist is positioned for tactical access. She can trigger it with her thumb without raising her arm or changing her stance. The target component is on the outer edge, approximately 7 millimeters in diameter. Special Agent Sterling was coordinating with multiple agencies simultaneously, her earpiece buzzing with constant updates. "Lieutenant, we've got additional intelligence from the cyber team. Vasquez's device requires a specific sequence to arm for detonation. 3 rapid presses of the trigger component, followed by a 5-second hold. If we can disable it during the hold sequence, the entire network shuts down safely." This added another layer of complexity to an already impossible shot. I wouldn't just need to hit a dime-sized target at nearly 1,300 yards. I'd need to time the shot to coincide with the specific moment in her arming sequence. "How will I know when she's initiating the sequence?" I asked. Rodriguez had been analyzing the audio intercepts. The device emits a low-frequency tone during the arming process. We can detect it through our directional microphones and relay the signal to you through your earpiece. You'll have approximately 3 seconds from the start of the tone until the optimal shooting window. Eddie Torino's wind data was being recalibrated for the 19th floor elevation. The thermal patterns were different at that height, with less interference from street-level activity, but more influence from the building's rooftop ventilation systems. Wind at the 19th floor showing 4 miles per hour from the northwest, consistent pattern, minimal gusts. Better conditions than what you had for the original target. I began working through the new ballistic solution, incorporating every variable we'd identified. Range, 1,289 yards. Elevation difference, 127 feet. Wind, 4 miles per hour northwest. Target size, 7 millimeters. Glass, standard quarter-inch with no coating. Timing window, approximately 3 seconds from audio cue. The mathematics were staggering. At that distance, a target 7 millimeters in diameter subtended an angle of roughly 0.3 milliradians. The bullet's flight time would be approximately 1.8 seconds, during which wind, gravity, and atmospheric conditions would all affect the trajectory. I'd need to predict not just where Vasquez would be when I fired, but where her wrist would be positioned when the bullet arrived nearly 2 seconds later. Dr. Chen finished her ballistic analysis and delivered results that made everyone on the roof pause. "Lieutenant, at this distance and with this target size, you're looking at a first-round hit probability of approximately 12% under optimal conditions." 12%. Even with all our intelligence, all our preparation, all our technological advantages, I was being asked to attempt something that had an 88% chance of failure. The silence on the rooftop was deafening as everyone processed the implications. "What if we wait for a closer opportunity?" Sterling asked. "Maybe she'll move to a different position, reduce the range somehow." Rodriguez shook his head. "The communication intercepts suggest they're preparing for final phase. Based on the timeline acceleration, we may not get another window. This could be our only chance." I spent the next 20 minutes dry-firing my rifle, practicing the exact trigger control and breathing sequence I'd need for the shot. Each practice pull had to be perfect because there would be no opportunity for adjustment or correction. 1 bullet, 1 chance, 247 lives hanging in the balance. The communications team had rigged a practice audio cue that simulated the tone from Vasquez's device. I practiced the timing sequence dozens of times, hearing the tone, acquiring the target, controlling my breathing, and executing the shot within the 3-second window. By the 15th repetition, the sequence had become muscle memory. But there was another element to the preparation that went beyond technical training. I spent time visualizing not just the successful shot, but the entire sequence of events that would follow. Vasquez's device going dark, the explosive network shutting down, the tactical teams moving in for hostage extraction. I needed to see the mission succeeding, not just the shot landing. Sterling received an update that compressed our timeline even further.
Intel suggests they're moving to final phase in approximately 1 hour. Vasquez has been checking her device more frequently, and we're seeing increased coordination between floors. Dr. Chen made a final adjustment to my scope based on the atmospheric conditions. Barometric pressure has slightly dropped, which will affect bullet trajectory. I've adjusted your elevation by 2 clicks to compensate.
The preparation phase had given us everything possible. Accurate ballistic data, timing intelligence, weather monitoring, and psychological preparation. But as I settled into my final shooting position and began watching Vasquez through my scope, I realized that all the preparation in the world couldn't change the fundamental reality of what I was attempting. This wasn't just the most difficult shot in sniper history. It was a shot that redefined what was considered possible with a rifle. The margin of error was so small that factors beyond my control, a gust of wind, a slight change in Vasquez's position, a millisecond variation in timing, could determine the outcome. Through my earpiece, Rodriguez's voice provided a status update. Vasquez is moving toward the northwest corner. Based on her pattern, she should reach the window position in approximately 8 minutes. I performed one final check of my equipment. Rifle zeroed and stable. Scope adjusted for all environmental factors. Ammunition verified and loaded. Radio communications clear. Emergency backup plans established with the tactical team. But the most important preparation had happened in my mind. I'd moved beyond the doubt and fear that had plagued me since learning about this mission. I'd stopped hearing my father's voice questioning my abilities under pressure. Instead, I heard Eddie Torino explaining wind patterns, Dr. Chen analyzing ballistic data, and Rodriguez mapping communication intercepts. This shot wouldn't succeed because of individual heroics or superior marksmanship alone. It would succeed because a team of specialists had worked together to identify every variable, calculate every factor, and provide me with the tools needed to attempt the impossible. In 8 minutes, Elena Vasquez would appear at the 19th floor window, and I would either validate every hour of preparation or prove that some shots truly are impossible. The preparation phase was complete. Now came the test of whether human precision could overcome mathematical improbability. "Command, this is Overwatch," I reported. "All preparations complete. Standing by for target acquisition." At 4:47 p.m., exactly 6 minutes before Elena Vasquez was scheduled to appear at the 19th floor window, my world exploded with chaos that no amount of preparation could have anticipated. All units, crackled the emergency frequency. "We have a major development. The terrorists have just released a live video feed to every major news network. They're broadcasting the interior of the building." Special Agent Sterling's tablet lit up with the feed, and what we saw made everyone on the rooftop freeze in horror. Kozlov stood in the center of the 17th floor, surrounded by hostages, speaking directly into a camera with the calm authority of a man delivering a lecture. "People of America," his accented voice carried clearly through the speakers, "you have been watching your government attempt to solve this situation through violence. You believe your sniper on the municipal building can save these innocent lives with a single bullet." My blood went cold. He was speaking directly to me, acknowledging my presence, turning our tactical operation into a public spectacle broadcast to millions. "Lieutenant Kendra Voss," Kozlov continued, and hearing my name spoken by the terrorist leader sent chills down my spine. "Daughter of Captain Rex Voss, the decorated sniper who believes women cannot handle pressure. You are about to prove him correct." Sterling grabbed my shoulder. "How does he know your father's name? How does he know any of this?" Through my scope, I could see Kozlov holding up what appeared to be a military service record, my father's record. Somehow, in the 3 years he'd been planning this operation, he'd researched not just our tactical capabilities, but our personal histories. "Your father served with distinction in Afghanistan, where he learned that precision shooting requires ice water in the veins. He taught you that emotional shooters miss, that women lack the psychological fortitude for life-and-death situations." The psychological warfare had reached a new level of sophistication. Kozlov wasn't just trying to prevent me from taking the shot, he was trying to destroy me psychologically by weaponizing my deepest personal insecurities on an international stage. Rodriguez's voice came through my earpiece with devastating news. The video feed is being broadcast live on CNN, Fox News, BBC, and every major network. Estimated global audience of over 200 million people. 200 million people were now watching to see whether Lieutenant Kendra Voss would validate or shatter every stereotype about women in combat roles. The shot had become more than a tactical operation. It was a public referendum on gender capability under ultimate pressure. Through the video feed, I watched Kozlov gesture toward the windows of the 19th floor. Elena Vasquez, my most trusted operative, holds the real power in this situation. In 3 minutes, she will appear at the northwest window, and your female sniper will attempt a shot that no human being has ever successfully made under combat conditions. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over his global audience. When she fails, when her emotional nature overcomes her technical training, when the pressure breaks her resolve, as it breaks all women in combat, 247 innocent people will die, and the world will understand that some roles are simply not meant for the weaker sex. The video feed showed hostages throughout the building. Senators, business leaders, federal judges, ordinary people who'd attended a conference and found themselves trapped in an international demonstration of gender warfare. Their faces showed terror, but also something else. Hope that someone, somewhere, might save them. Sterling was coordinating frantically with the Tactical Command Center. Can we cut the video feed? Jam their transmission somehow? Negative. They're using satellite uplinks and multiple redundant systems. The entire world is watching this unfold in real time.
I realized that Kozlov had orchestrated something far beyond terrorism. He'd created a globally televised test of everything I'd spent my career trying to prove. Every argument about women in combat roles, every debate about physical and psychological differences between men and women, every stereotype about emotional stability under pressure, all of it was converging on this moment. Through my scope, I could see movement on the 19th floor. Vasquez was approaching the northwest corner, following the pattern we'd observed. In 90 seconds, she would appear at the window, and I would attempt the most watched shot in human history. The pressure was unlike anything I'd experienced. Not just the technical challenge of the shot itself, but the knowledge that every aspect of my performance was being analyzed by military experts, media commentators, and millions of viewers worldwide. Success would vindicate every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or psychologically resilient enough for combat roles. Failure would provide ammunition for those arguments for generations. My radio crackled with an unexpected transmission, a familiar voice that made my hands shake for the first time in hours. Kenny, this is Dad. I'm watching the news feed. I'm watching what you're being asked to do. Captain Rex Voss was speaking to me over an open channel, his voice carrying clearly through the tactical frequency. Somehow, he'd managed to contact the command center and request direct communication with his daughter. I was wrong, Kenny. About everything. About women under pressure, about emotional shooters, about your capabilities. I've been watching you prepare for this shot, and I've never seen anything more professional in my life. The timing was devastating. My father, whose approval I'd sought for 28 years, was finally giving it to me at the moment when I needed absolute focus for the most critical shot of my career. You're not just my daughter up there, Dad continued, his voice breaking slightly. You're the best sniper I've ever seen, and I should have told you that years ago. Now show the world what Lieutenant Kendra Voss can do when it matters most. Through my scope, I saw Vasquez step into position at the 19th floor window. The timing device on Rodriguez's equipment began showing the countdown. 60 seconds until her scheduled communication window opened. 30 seconds until I would attempt to hit a 7mm target at 1,289 yards, while 200 million people watched to see if women could handle ultimate pressure. I keyed my radio for what I knew would be my final transmission before the shot. Command, this is Lieutenant Kendra Voss. I have the target, taking the shot on my mark. The confrontation was no longer just tactical. It had become the most public test of female capability under pressure in military history. And in 20 seconds, the world would know whether I was the professional my father finally believed me to be, or the failure that Kozlov was counting on. The world held its breath as I settled into my final shooting position. 200 million people watching through news cameras while Elena Vasquez stepped into the 19th floor window frame. Through my scope, the 7mm target component on her wrist device came into sharp focus, a metallic glint that represented the difference between salvation and catastrophe for 247 innocent lives. Rodriguez's voice came through my earpiece with mechanical precision. Target acquired. Communication window opening in 10 seconds. Standing by for audio signature. Everything Eddie Torino had taught me about wind patterns, everything Dr. Chen had calculated about ballistic trajectories, everything the team had discovered about timing and targets, it all converged into this single moment. I controlled my breathing, finding the natural respiratory pause that would give me the steadiest platform for the shot. Audio signature detected, Rodriguez announced. Vasquez is initiating the arming sequence. You have your 3-second window starting now. The low-frequency tone filled my earpiece as Vasquez pressed the trigger component 3 times in rapid succession. Through my scope, I could see her thumb positioned over the device, beginning the 5-second hold that would arm the dead man's switch for global detonation. Time dilated into something approaching absolute clarity. I could feel my heartbeat, slow and steady, providing a rhythmic countdown. The crosshairs settled on the exact center of the target component, a piece of technology smaller than a dime that controlled the fate of nearly 250 human beings. The trigger pull felt perfect, smooth, straight back, no lateral pressure that could disturb the rifle's aim. The recoil was absorbed cleanly by my shooting position, the rifle returning immediately to battery as the bullet began its 1.8-second journey across 12 city blocks. Through my scope, I watched the bullet's impact with crystalline clarity. The 7mm target component disintegrated in a shower of sparks and metallic fragments. Vasquez jerked her hand back instinctively, staring at her wrist in shock as the device's display went dark. For a moment that stretched into eternity, nothing happened. No explosions, no collapsing buildings, no sounds of catastrophe. Just silence. As 200 million people around the world processed what they had just witnessed. Then Rodriguez's voice exploded through my earpiece. Target neutralized. Repeat, target neutralized. All explosive networks showing inactive status. The Meridian Tower remained standing, its windows intact, its structure solid. Through my scope, I could see hostages on multiple floors, beginning to realize that the immediate threat had passed. Some were crying, others embracing, many simply staring in disbelief at their survival. Kozlov's voice came through the global broadcast one final time, but the confidence was gone, replaced by the hollow tone of a man whose carefully orchestrated plan had just been shattered by a woman with a rifle. This was not supposed to be possible. No human being can make that shot under these conditions. Special Agent Sterling was coordinating with tactical teams that were already moving into the building. All units, explosive threat is neutralized. Begin hostage extraction procedures immediately. But the shot's impact extended far beyond the tactical situation. Through news feeds around the world, military experts were analyzing what they had just witnessed. The consensus was immediate and unanimous. Lieutenant Kendra Voss had just accomplished the most precise shot in sniper history, under the most pressured conditions ever recorded. My radio crackled with a transmission that made everything else fade into background noise. "Kenny, this is your old man," Dad's voice was thick with emotion and pride. "I've been wrong about a lot of things in my life, but I've never been more wrong about anything than I was about you. What you just did, that wasn't just shooting. That was artistry." Through the tactical frequency, Tyler's voice joined the conversation. "Holy hell, Kenny. I'm watching this with my entire unit. You just redefined what's possible with the rifle." Over the next hour, as tactical teams extracted all 247 hostages safely from the Meridian Tower, the global reaction continued to build. Social media exploded with commentary about the shot, about women in combat roles, about the precise intersection of skill, preparation, and courage that had saved nearly 250 lives. The numbers that would define the shot entered sniper training manuals worldwide: 1,289 yards, 7mm target, 12% probability of success, 1.8-second flight time, 3-second window, 200 million witnesses. But more than technical specifications, the shot became the symbol of what could be achieved when expertise, preparation, and determination converged under ultimate pressure. Elena Vasquez was taken into custody as she exited the building, her expression one of professional respect mixed with disbelief. Kozlov and his remaining operatives surrendered without resistance, their psychological warfare tactics rendered powerless by the precision of a woman they had underestimated. 6 months later, I stood in the White House Rose Garden as President Harrison presented me with the Medal of Valor, the highest award for law enforcement heroism. Dad and Tyler were in the front row, both wearing dress uniforms, both radiating the kind of pride that had been missing from family gatherings for most of my life. Lieutenant Kendra Voss demonstrated that heroism knows no gender, that precision is colorblind, and that when American lives hang in the balance, skill and courage matter more than any stereotype or limitation others might attempt to impose. The medal was meaningful, but what mattered more was the phone call I received that evening from a young woman in Montana who had been inspired to join the military after watching the news coverage. She was the first of hundreds of women who reached out over the following months, each sharing stories of how seeing a female sniper succeed under ultimate pressure had changed their perception of what was possible. Eddie Torino attended the ceremony, wearing a borrowed suit and looking profoundly uncomfortable in formal settings. His contribution to the mission's success had been officially recognized, and he'd been invited to speak at military academies about the importance of environmental intelligence in precision shooting. "Never thought my knowledge about wind patterns would save anybody's life," he told reporters, "but I guess expertise shows up in unexpected places." The Meridian Tower was repaired and renovated, with a memorial plaque in the lobby honoring the 247 hostages who survived what became known as the Impossible Shot Crisis. The building reopened as a federal facility, housing agencies dedicated to counterterrorism and precision training.
But the most meaningful change was personal. Family dinners at Dad's house in Pine Ridge became celebrations of shared expertise rather than competitions between war stories. Dad would ask detailed questions about my tactical procedures, my training methods, my equipment choices. Tyler and I became partners rather than rivals, comparing notes on wind reading and target acquisition. "You know what I learned from watching you take that shot?" Dad said during one of those dinners. "I learned that the best snipers aren't the ones who never feel pressure. They're the ones who use pressure to sharpen their focus." The deer I'd missed 12 years earlier in the Blackstone Mountains had taught me about failure and its consequences. The impossible shot in Valdris City had taught me that failure was just one outcome among many, and that preparation, expertise, and determination could shift the odds in ways that seemed miraculous to outside observers. Today, I run the Federal Precision Shooting Academy, where I train snipers from law enforcement and military agencies worldwide. The curriculum includes technical marksmanship, of course, but also environmental analysis, psychological preparation, and team coordination. Students learn that the most important shot is often the one you don't have to take because you've prepared so thoroughly that other solutions become possible. On the wall of my office hangs a photo from that day on the municipal building roof. Me behind my rifle, surrounded by the team of specialists who made the impossible shot possible. Below it is a quote that has become the Academy's motto. "Precision is not about perfection. It's about preparation meeting opportunity under pressure." And sometimes, when new students ask about the pressure of high-stakes shooting, I tell them about a maintenance worker named Eddie, who understood wind patterns, a ballistics expert who analyzed glass coatings, and a communications specialist who tracked timing patterns. I tell them that the most important lesson isn't about individual heroics, but about recognizing that the impossible becomes achievable when the right people work together toward a common goal. The shot that saved 247 lives wasn't just about marksmanship. It was about proving that when stakes are highest, preparation and teamwork can overcome any limitation others might try to impose. And it was about finally silencing the voice that had told me for 28 years that I wasn't good enough when it mattered most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.